Welcome to Misfit Muse. If you are new here, I'm Erin. I am a face and body painter and a special effects makeup artist. And one of the questions that I get most frequently is, what paints do I use to create the things that I create? The amount of different types of products available can be super overwhelming. So I decided to make this video where we are going to discuss 10 paints in 10 minutes. This is going to be a challenge because I am a talker. Don't come for me if this video is more than 10 minutes. Let's do this. The first type of body paint that I'm going to cover is cream. It is one of the most inexpensive and accessible. It's everywhere come Halloween season. All different types, all different brands. They are water-based. They are, well, creamy, which means they're not going to dry down very fast, if at all. One of the first full torso paints that I ever did on myself, right here, was done with all cream tube body paints. Honestly, 3 years later, I don't know how I did it. If you're looking to create a Halloween look and you don't want to invest a ton of money in a bunch of paints that you're only going to use one time, then these will work. The second type of paint I'm going to cover is grease paint. Tons of us will tell you that we started with grease paint and that it is our arch nemesis. The reason for that is that grease paint is oil-based and it does not dry. It will never dry. You must set it with a setting powder. The benefit is that it is sweat proof. Clowns, mimes in theater, this works to get a really pigmented color that's not going to sweat off or crack. Although it feels really heavy. Here's an example of a grease paint. This is a little Wet n Wild palette. These are also really inexpensive. Excuse my dirty palette there. It's gonna be really pigmented, so it's nice for that. The next paint I'm going to cover is water activated face and body paints. This one actually is sort of 2-in-1. It has some subcategories. The water activated body paint is exactly what it sounds like. You need water to activate it. It is mostly dry to the touch. You need a spray bottle or a wet paintbrush to activate the paint. I like to spray my cakes actually just like that. This is an example of water activated body paint. So this particular one is Mayron. I have a few palettes here from MorphFX. Graftobian, Bo Buggles, and Tag are all well-known brands for face and body paint. The big difference between these brands is that some are wax-based and some are glycerin-based. And the major difference between them is that the glycerin-based is going to be a little bit more blendable and not quite as heavy. The pro to wax-based is that you are going to get very opaque color. And I'm actually going to put up right here a swatch from a friend of mine comparing whites in different water activated paints. Generally, you will hear that the wax-based paints are really, really good for detail and line work. I use water activated body paints more than anything else by far. Okay, the next type of face paint that I'm going to talk about is the split cake. Technically, the split cake is still a water activated paint, but it is to me entirely its own animal. When I am not doing body painting shows or creating looks for you guys or my Instagram, I actually am face painting at events and kids' parties. And what I will use the majority of the time is going to be what's called a split cake. It's called a split cake because the cake or pan is split into multiple colors, like so. Some examples of things that I have done with either the split cake with a sponge or the smaller split cake with one stroke technique. You're able to get a lot of really cool dimension really fast. The next type of paint I'm going to talk about is alcohol activated paints. Just like the name suggests, they are activated by alcohol instead of water. Now, these paints are rock hard to the touch. They're not coming off. Water will do nothing. You need to activate them with alcohol. Not just any alcohol, you need 99% isopropyl alcohol. 70% will not do it. 91% will not do it. It needs to be 99%. 99%. What is so cool about the alcohol activated paint is that you are able to create an almost translucent under the skin look. This is super good for bruises, bites, tattoos. The other thing is that these are not going to come off easily in water. You either need a remover or you need some more alcohol to take it off. It's also not really meant for a full body paint. I would not want 99% alcohol all over my body. The other downside to the alcohol activated body paint is that it is extremely pricey. I want to say that this palette right here was around $80. I will double check that and put it somewhere here on the screen, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay, the next paint that I'm going to talk about is going to be water-based airbrush paint. If you're unfamiliar with airbrushing, I could do an entire video on that. If that is something that you'd be interested in seeing, let me know down below. Airbrush paint that is ready to use with an airbrush. It's water-based, which means much like the water-activated paints, it will come off if you sweat or get wet. The nice thing about water-based paints is that it's sort of easy on the skin, it's easy to wash off, and it's also less expensive than its counterpart, which we are going to talk about next. And that is hybrid or alcohol-based airbrush paint. I don't have any of this in front of me. I don't have any for personal use strictly because it's a little bit cost prohibitive. I do work at a haunted house. We strictly use a hybrid or alcohol-based airbrush paint, perfect for anytime you're going to be in the heat, sweating, or also for water photo shoots. So the next type of paint is sort of a crossover to the airbrush paints because it can be used multiple ways, and that is liquid makeup. Specifically, I here have Maron's liquid makeup. I can use it on its own with a paintbrush, but what I really like about it is occasionally I will use it with a stipple sponge or with a beauty blender if I'm doing a look that I want to cover a large surface for, and I don't really want either a heavy oil-based grease paint or a water activated paint that could possibly crack. But the way that I personally use this the most is with mixing liquid in my air gun. So I use this as airbrush paint. And the reason that I use this as opposed to a pre-mixed airbrush paint is that it's just a little bit less expensive. That is the pro to it, since the majority of the paints that I do are for shows or photo shoots. They're immediately being washed off after they are judged or photographed. So I don't need paints that have longevity. I don't need paints that are going to be able to withstand, you know, heat or sweat or performing for the most part. So for the purpose that I use them for, this is perfect. Up next we have UV paints and pigments. Now there is a difference between glow in the dark and UV. The difference is obviously that the glow paints will just simply glow in the dark, and the UV paints need black light or UV light to activate the glow. This is also another water activated paint, but it is UV reactive. And I have a few tube paints that are going to be like those cream paints that I showed you at the beginning. I also really like to use loose pigments. These are UV. These specific ones are from Makeup of Murder. I will link their site down below. You can use code MISFIT for a discount. That was super awkward, but you know, that's on brand. What's really cool about these is that you can mix them with just a little bit of water and they will act as face or body paints. I like to spray the water either on myself or mix it in small batches. I don't actually add it to my pigments because I use these in multiple ways, but here is an example of a look that I did specifically with these pigments. Last but not least is metallic paints. Now again, a lot of these are crossovers. So I have metallic paints both in water activated form, cream form, and pigmented powder form. The difference between, say, this metallic palette here, which is a water activated, and these loose pigment powders that I mix with mixing liquid, your pigmentation is going to be much more metallic with the pigments than it is with the cake. This is more of a shimmer, and this really gives you like a very realistic metallic look. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful helpful. If you have any specific questions about anything that we covered in this video, please let me know in the comments below. I do answer every single comment. Please think about subscribing. It would mean the world to me. Click that bell notification so that you know when I post new videos. Be kind, be weird, make cool art.